on the possible computational power of the human mind. The aim of this paper is to address the question: can an artificial neural network model be used as a possible characterization of the power of the human mind? We will discuss what might be the relationship between such a model and its natural counterpart. A possible characterization of the different power capabilities of the mind is suggested in terms of the information contained and its computational complexity, or achievable by it. Such characterization takes advantage of recent results based on natural neural networks and the computational power of arbitrary artificial neural networks. The possible acceptance of neural networks as the model of the human mind's operation makes the aforementioned quite relevant. Introduction. Much interest has been focused on the comparison between the brain and computers. A variety of obvious analogies exist, based on several thoughts. Some authors from very diverse research areas, such as philosophy, physics, computer science, etc., claim that the human mind could be more powerful than Turing machines. Nevertheless, they do not agree on what these super Turing capabilities mean. Consequently, there is no universally accepted characterization of this extra power and how it could be related to the human mind, even though there is strong defense of these authors' theories based on whether or not humans are superminds capable of processing information not Turing computable. Nowadays, it is accepted that the nervous system, including the spinal cord and the neocortex, control behavior. In a simplified picture, the nervous system could be viewed as a device which receives input from various senses and produces output in the form of some action. From a computational point of view, the word "produces" could be harmlessly substituted by "computes", in the sense that the mind computes in a way a Turing machine does. One of the most interesting and challenging tasks in science is to assume that this is a possibility in order to understand how these computations are performed. Thus, it is not surprising that the field of neuroscience attracts many researchers not only from the fields of biology and computer science, but also from the area of physics. Contributions to the mind's natural computation require a strong effort towards interdisciplinary collaboration. As Teuscher and Sipper pointed out, there are very few problems stemming from neural computation on which a theoretical computer scientist can commence work without further interaction or collaboration with neuroscientists. Since the artificial model was inspired in the natural, in this paper we will explore the bridge between them on the basis of recent work. Since artificial neural networks have been inspired by their biological counterparts, it is natural to ask about the feedback from the artificial to the biological. We attempt to build such a bridge by taking the standard model of ANNs and the way in which ARNNs admits arbitrary weights in order to characterize its computational power by using the complexity of the weights or the timing of the pulses. Most of what happens in our brain does so without our being aware of it, so that many things that seem easy to us involve highly complex neural circuits and operations. Most practical applications of artificial neural networks are based on a computation model involving the propagation of continuous variables from one processing unit to the next. Inspired by a simplistic vision of how messages are transferred between neurons, computer scientists invented the artificial computational approach to target a wider range of problems in many application areas. Biological neurons are connected by synapses, which are the links that carry messages between them. Using synapses, neurons can carry pulses to activate each other with different threshold values. Neurons are the computational part of the network, while links connect different neurons and enable messages to flow among them. Each link is a connection with a weight that affects the carried message in a certain way. In fact, each link receives a value from an input neuron, multiplies it by a given weight, and then passes it to another neuron. Between this process, several sources of computational power can be identified. This means that the source of the computational power of an NN might have at least three possible sources: A, one carried by the operations in the neuron itself; B, the message between neurons involving pulses, action potentials, and timing; C, the complexity of the neural network weights in terms of their capability to encode information which emplace A and B. As biological-inspired devices, artificial neural networks have been suggested as a computational theory of mental activity. An artificial neural network is mathematically defined as a weighted directed graph in which each vertex represents a neuron and each arrow a connection. An analog definition 1. An analog recurrent neural network, or RNN, or ARNN, is a finite network of nodes called neurons and connections, wherein the synaptic weight associated with each connection, determining the coupling strength of the two end nodes, is a real analog value. An ARNN is basically an artificial neural network allowing loops, recurrent and irrational, even non-Turing computable numbers, as weights. Analog. We consider the question about the possible computational power of the human mind, and this power as a problem of computability, general and tractability, or practical computability out of its scope, then making only emphasis on the computational power defined by the Turing degrees, and beyond. The key arguments which form the basis of our position are: 1. ARNNs are a plausible model of the human brain because they define a wide range of different levels of computational power. 2. At least some characteristics of the human mind arise from the human brain. 3. ARNNs are therefore a plausible model of the human mind. 4. It has been argued that the human mind could be depicted or fully simulated by Turing machines and others, as it has a super-Turing computational power. 5. Therefore, prima facie, it seems reasonable to explore claims on the human mind's supposed Turing or super-Turing capacities through an analysis of ARNNs in relation to recent work on the brain's own neural network. 6. That an analysis of ARNNs supports Turing and super-Turing capabilities, and other more established findings give rise to a taxonomy of computational capabilities. 7. The taxonomy of computational capabilities give rise to prima facie reasonable hypotheses concerning the human mind. The contribution of this paper to our knowledge is to build up this argument and generate hypotheses binding artificial models to the natural. With reference to argument number 1, the ARNN model even allows to consider a situation in which the weights and the ARNN become equivalent in power to automaton of lower power, including the Turing machine. However, the ARNN and a wider generalization proposed in this paper to be fully explored in another, yet to be published, allows us to consider simultaneously all possible scenarios. Claim 2 is widely accepted in different degrees of engagement. It is the case of the mind-body problem, and our claim is based on the consideration of the mind as the brain operation. Hence, no distinction is made between brain and mind. However, it is our assumption that the mind does not subtract any computational power and fully inherits the whole computational power of the brain. If mind adds some computational power to the overall system, or arguments still apply as lower bound. By contrast, if they might subtract computational power, our claims should be reformulated in terms of it, and our arguments will lay as upper bound. Our intent is to discuss the mathematical features which a model should possess if it is to aspire to certain computable power. Our choice of ARNN rests on two considerations. A. It has been proposed as a model with potentially non-computable capabilities, provided some requirements are met. See later. B. As a neural network model, neuroscientists might find it easier to relate it to their own empirical work. Most of their research is based on pseudo-analog values, and therefore they can put forward and test concrete hypotheses to confirm or refute the model. Additionally, the ARNN represents a refinement on what had been typically regarded as the mathematical definition of an ANN, which did not make any distinction between the complexity of the weights in terms of the computational power beyond the seminal work of Minsky. Nevertheless, neural networks which run on digital computers operate on a Turing-computable subset of irrational numbers, a strong restriction that determines a priori its computational power. Hence, some enthusiasm generated by important experimental and theoretical results cannot be extended easily to applications, because there is no straightforward way to make real numbers available, even assuming its possible existence. Digital hardware implementation use a finite number of bits for weight storage and rational restraint values for firing rates. Weights and operations and remain limited to computational power. Even analog implementations, which are often cited for their ability to implement real numbers easily, such as analog quantities, are limited in their precision by issues such as dynamic range, noise, VLSI, area and power dissipation problems. Thus, in theory and in practice, most implementations use rational numbers, or at most a subset of irrational numbers, the Turing-computable ones. The classical approach of computability theory is to consider models operating on finite strings of symbols from a finite alphabet. Such strings may represent various discrete objects, such as integers or algebraic expressions, but cannot represent general, real or complex numbers, even though most mathematical models are based on real numbers. The Turing machine and its generalization in the form of the universal Turing machine UTM is the accepted model of computation, while under the Judge-Turing thesis, it is considered the authoritative model for effective computation. However, some researchers have proposed other models in which real numbers play the main role in effective computations.